Hey folks, my buddy Craig asked me if I could look at his rug doctor, and while I am by no means a professional gynecologist, I figured I might be able to help him out and show you guys what I find on the channel. As you can see, when you put the dispense tank on it, after a few seconds the water comes pouring out of the bottom. That's not supposed to happen until you pull the trigger that opens the valve that dispenses the water. I suspect the problem we're having is that there is the valve itself is stuck open, and we're just going to take it apart and see if we can fix it. So let's do a quick anatomy lesson on this thing. Your clean water and detergent goes into this tank right here, goes in through the top right here, comes out of the bottom and goes into a port in here. It goes back behind the machine and is dripped onto the brush or beater bar, I think they're called. And that's what's cleaning your carpet, of course. After that, it's sucked up through this hose and into this tank right here, which is your dirty water schmutz tank, and you empty that occasionally. Around back, you've got the power button, and you've got a handle release so you can lean it back while you're cleaning your carpet. Of course, this is the trigger or handle I was talking about earlier. It goes down through this handle and opens a valve that lets the water drip, and in this case it's open all the time. It doesn't feel like it. This actually feels like it's clicking okay, but apparently it's not, because water's coming out all the time. The first thing we're going to want to do is remove this handle, and that'll give us access to the top of the valve, and it's pretty easy to do. They actually, a little button in here, a little metal button on a spring, and you push that in and it'll pop right out of the top. I suspect this was probably shipped from the factory in a box like this to save on space. It's certainly what I would do. The trigger here pushes a little thing right there, thing being a technical term, which pushes on the top of the valve, which is in here. And we might be able to just work this valve back and forth and get this thing to quit leaking, but of course that's not what we're going to do. We're going to make this as complicated as we can. So around here I've already removed them, but there were 4 of my favorite Torx screws in here, and then you can pull this cover off, and this is the valve right here. The water once again goes in from the top here, comes down through this valve and leaks down on top of the brush. I looked on eBay, and there's a guy that was selling this valve for $25, a brand new one. Unfortunately, he's out of stock, and frankly, you know, 25 bucks is maybe what this thing is worth at a thrift store, this whole thing. So I wasn't going to buy it anyway, because where's the fun in that? So we have a few options as far as fixing this valve goes. Probably the first and best would have been to just take this whole thing out and replace it with a brand new one. Like I said earlier, it just wasn't worth the money. This is just a low-cost carpet cleaner, and $25 was just too much for the valve. And the guy didn't have it anyway, so we couldn't replace it even if we wanted to. The second would have been to take the valve out of the machine and take it apart on the bench, and that's a good option. But in this case, the way this valve is being held in is sort of snapped in with a one-direction connector. And so if I took it apart, I run the risk of breaking the valve, and I didn't want to do that. So we're just going to roll with the punches here and just do what we can. And in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to take the valve apart on the machine. This is not really designed to be taken apart on the machine, but once again, that's part of the fun, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to grab this particular valve, and this is specific to this machine. Everyone's probably different. But that's just how we're going to deal with this one. And we're going to grab the bottom of this valve and twist it, and now what it's going to do is it's actually going to come apart. And what we have inside is a spring, and this is the I don't know, I guess you could say the bottom seal to the valve spring. And then we're going to reach in and we're going to push the core of the valve out. And the valve consists of 2 O-rings, which I'm guessing keep water from flowing back up into the system, and then this bottom one is likely the seal that keeps the water from flowing to the brush until you pull the trigger. And so what we're going to do is we're actually just going to clean this off and then clean off the inside of the valve as well. And we're going to put a little dab, and I mean just the slightest little bit of grease on all 3 of these O-rings. I'm using a product called Super Lube because that's what I got. So we're going to do that. We're going to put it back together. I'm also going to stretch this spring a little bit just to give it a little more tension when it is pushing, when it is closing the valve. So we're going to do that, and you know, and once we're done with that, we'll put everything back together, and hopefully that'll fix the problem. Here's a close-up view of what's inside that valve. This is the plunger, and we've got the 3 little O-rings. 1 little, 2 little, 3 little O-rings. This is the spring. We're gonna grab it at both ends and pull it a little bit. Try and get a little more tension on that plunger when it closes up. You don't want to go crazy when you're pulling a spring. You could pull it too much and deform it. So you know, just be mindful of that. We're gonna clean the O-rings off with a little bit of, this is just Windex on a paper towel, and then we're gonna get the slightest amount of grease, and I'm just using what's left on the nozzle of this grease thing. We're going to wipe it on the O-rings. We don't want to use a lot because we run the risk of clogging the system up if there's a big gob on here. Secondly, it's grease, and we don't want it to be carried through from the clean water to your carpet. That would be kind of idiotic. But what the grease is going to do is, if there's any small deformities in the rubber, it's going to fill those up. It's also going to allow it to slide in and out a little bit easier. That, combined with the extra tension on the spring, will hopefully close this valve up nicely, and we won't have a problem with it leaking anymore. I'm also going to take maybe on a Q-tip or something, a little bit of the Windex and clean the inside of the valve, the little tube that this all fits into. There's a couple of things to consider when we're thinking about what kind of grease to use for this job. First of all, grease is the word. Wait, I thought bird was the word. Can they both be the word? I'll have to check with my lawyer. Anyway, more importantly, some greases just don't play nice with rubber. For example, Vaseline will soften up rubber over time. Anybody who's taken an 8th grade health class can probably remember that pretty well. The other thing is, we're running detergent and water through this valve. And detergent, its main job is to dissolve grease and grime, and so we want to use a grease that's relatively stable in that kind of environment. So I have no affiliation with Super Lube. Of course, if they want to give me some money, I'm more than willing to take it. But it is available. It's a silicone base, so it isn't. So it's not going to eat your rubber. It's relatively impervious to chemicals, and they sell it at a lot of hardware stores. So give it a shot for this job. Just don't use any old grease that you have lying around. That's my point. So now it's just a matter of putting everything back together in the reverse order. We'll take the plunger and put that back in the valve body. Put the spring in this part. And we'll twist it all back together. It locks in place. Handle. I would normally put this back on, but you know how I feel about putting these things back together on camera. We'll put the dirty water tank, and I'm going to fill this up with water, and we're going to test it. I am going to do this downstairs on the concrete though, because I don't want to mess up my beautiful faux wood floor. So I will see you guys downstairs, and we'll test this thing out and make sure our repair worked. So I have the tank filled here. I filled it up most of the way with water. I've been letting it sit for about 5 minutes to make sure it was working. Any of the water you see out here in front of you is just from my initial test, just to make sure everything was working. Anyway, the repair seems to have taken. If I pull the handle, it's going to take a minute or two, but it does drizzle water out the way it's supposed to. And when I release, it stops, which is what it's supposed to do. Hopefully that was the problem with the machine, because frankly Craig could not tell me what was wrong. He just said it wasn't working. And that was the only thing I found. I plugged it in, the vacuum part worked fine, it was sucking water in fine. It was just constantly pouring out water regardless of whether you were pulling the trigger or not. So hopefully you found that interesting, and like, subscribe, all that sort of stuff. Also, I'm going to be selling merch pretty soon, so if you're looking for a shirt that says Kenosha makes Beloit look like Gurney, stick around, and I'll start posting stuff on a web page so you can buy my merch. Thanks again for watching. I took this front cover off for one final shot just to show you how this thing dispenses water. So it's not dispensing now. I'm about to pull the trigger. Now it's dispensing water out the front, and then the beater bars would turn around, the vacuum would turn on and suck it all up. So anyway, thanks for watching. Bye.